Hey friends, welcome to the Fireside. What you are about to watch and or listen to is an Inside Fireside Technique Talk. If you're not familiar with Technique Talks, they are one of our monthly events that we host in the Inside Fireside Tattoo Club. Inside Fireside is a group of tattooers who work together to hone our skills and become better artists. And the difference between a Technique Talk and a traditional podcast that you've probably seen me do before is that the Technique Talks tend to go a little deeper into working processes, materials, things like that of the artists that we're interviewing. So we're a podcast. We might just talk about any random topic. We're a little more dialed in on the Technique Talks, trying to tease out the things that make the artists that we're interviewing, tease out the things that make them unique. Second thing that is pretty different about Technique Talks is that it's not just me and the artist having a conversation. You'll notice our entire Inside Fireside Club is welcome to join and jump in on the conversation, ask questions, share ideas, and things like that. So it's really a pretty unique thing. I've really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite thing that we do in the Inside Fireside Tattoo Club. But if you would like to be a part of the club, or if you'd like to jump in on these conversations with us, you're welcome to join. We would love to have you. We do a ton of fun stuff. I won't go into it here. I will leave a link or a card or something. You'll be able to find out more about the Inside Fireside Club. There's no obligation to it. You can join 1 month, and if it's not for you, you can ditch it the next month. But anyways, I hope you enjoy this technique talk, and I'll see you at the end. In. Think we should kick it off, or give folks a few more minutes to roll in? We can start with a little introduction.
Yeah, I think we could start up now.
Right.
Unless you want to wait till 5 after.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We'll start with just a little. Zach, you want to give just a little bit of background for folks who may not know, at least your background? I think most everyone should know your work now. We've been sharing it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'm Zack Singer. I've been tattooing 21 years. It's crazy even saying that. It's time flies tattooing. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. And I've really gone through so many genres of tattooing, always trying to evolve my style and kind of going with the times and seeing what, just where it's all going and headed. It's been a really fun adventure. And I'm looking forward to see where it continues to head.
Yeah. Do you remember talking about your style, like style changing? I'm sure you won't remember this, but the first time we podcasted together, I guess the only time, I don't know if we've done it more than once or not, but we had the same client, and I can't think of her name, but she had a piece. She lives in Arkansas now, and she has a piece that you did on her that's like a skeleton that's almost super fine line, black and gray. She was really young at that point with a bunch of small flowers. It might be based on a Grateful Dead kind of thing or something.
Oh, actually, I remember that tattoo. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was back when I would do whatever clients brought to me and said, "This is what I want."
Yeah, I remember.
But I feel like that's necessary. You have to go through that phase, and that's how you harness your skills and your techniques and what you like and what you don't like to do and what's going to last and all those things.
Yeah. I remember when I started tattooing her, I was like, man, who did this piece on your arm? And I didn't know you at the time. I don't think you were very well known at that time at all. If you were just starting to, I guess, make a name for yourself online, because I remember like looking at it and be like, holy shit, it's so ticky, but everything is like, it was meticulous. It was tiny, but it was meticulous. There were so many little things happening. I was like, that's such a crazy tattoo. And she's like, yeah, it's based on whatever it was based on. And she was like, I wanted to get more done, but he's hard to get booked with now. He's booked out further. And that's how I first found you. She introduced me to you, to your work at that point. And then when I saw what you were doing, I was like, oh yeah, he doesn't tattoo anything like that at all. Like,
no. And that's one of those, things that, like, as you start getting good at tattooing and you're trying to develop your style, you kind of have to stick to your guns and start doing what is fun for you. I mean, obviously you got to pay the bills, but if you start getting busy, it's like, do what makes your heart feel good as a tattoo artist and what makes you feel like you're evolving in the right direction, so you're excited for each tattoo. You're not just going to work, you're going to create instead.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think that's a struggle. One of the struggles with that I've always found are those clients, like the ones who supported you before, early on, and you want to find ways to to keep them happy, and then it comes a time where you kind of outgrow them in a lot of ways. Maybe it's for any
What?
number of reasons.
Still tattoo some people that I used to tattoo that type of imagery on, and they've really enjoyed seeing my growth and like me developing my style. And so now they're just like, they'll come to me and be like, do whatever you want. You know, I love your work, you know, so it's very important to still build those relationships, do those tattoos, because you never know, those might be the people in the future that are just some of your most trusting clients. You know, they're like, oh, you did what I wanted. Now I want you to do whatever you want to do, because they see the proof, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, let me do a little screen share and let's just talk about kind of what uh how where your style has kind of gone and I'm can everyone see that now? Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna start. I'll just start clicking just in case people haven't seen your work for some reason. There's a lot I think we could go into. I mean, your from design to execution to subject matter and where the subject matter kind of ideas come from to photography and presentation and everything in between. We were talking before everybody jumped on that you have put together a seminar and you've done it a handful of times. Like, how is your seminar outlined? Maybe we could start like that. Just like, what do you feel like is important to address when people are.
So I always say this, and it's the first thing that comes to my mind, because whenever I get set up, the quality of your tattoo starts with the quality of your setup. You know, I'll see some people set up their ink caps and they're a mess and they're uneven and there's ink already spilt out. Their paper towels are crooked. Their needles are stacked in weird areas. I think it's super important to start with a super, super clean and neat setup. And it just allows you to just have a cleaner space to work from. You know, I feel like it's distracting. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point you don't hear a lot about. And so your advice on that is like whatever feels clean and neat to that person. Is like you don't believe that you necessarily
well,
have to set up each
and repetition, like
repetition.
having like, you know, a rhythm in how you set things up, you know.
Mhm.
That's one of the
Yeah.
first things. And then, you know, God, I'm trying to think. It's been a few months since I did my last seminar.
Well,
Um,
do
and
you
then I'll go through, you know, the types of, you know, needles I use and why, the type of machine I use, the stroke I use.
Mhm.
Um,
And what do you think about, I mean, do you feel like people get super hung up on like, oh, I want to do tattoos that look like this, so I should use Zach's complete like exact setup? Do you find when you give advice like that that people think that that's gonna solve their
No,
problems
I
or
always
what?
give a disclaimer, because I've done tons of collaboration tattoos, and where I try to use their setup, you know, and their work is just as much on my caliber of work as well. And you know, I don't want to use their machine or their, you know, gray wash setup. One thing that comes to mind is Rimber and I, a fantastic black and gray artist.
Mhm.
We did a collaboration tattoo together, and when we were getting set up, his apprentice was setting us up and was like, "Hey, you want me to set up a second gray wash set?" And I was like, "Oh no!" I was like, "I'll use Rimbers. It'll be fine." I was like, "His black and gray is super smooth. You know, it looks like there's a even amount of, you know, caps out there. There should be a nice gradient." And when I was using it, it was just like messing with my head, not being able to have that consistency that I was talking about.
Mm.
You know, one
Yeah.
person might use a 4 drop and a 1 drop in a cap and a, you know, a 20 drop, and they're able to create this whole spectrum in there because they have that repetition of tapping into their cup to dilute, you know, a drop setup. Um, it just,
Yeah.
that repetition's super important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So when you're sharing your setup with people during your seminar, that disclaimer is essentially like I use this because it's predictable and I know what the results are going to be for me.
Right.
You're not gonna set it out and nail it based on.
Well, it makes, if you do have to do a touch up or anything, you know, you can confidently go into, you know, like a soft cheek area or something, and know that your drop setup is going to, you know, work sufficiently to go in there. It's not going to go, oh shit, you know, it's too dark or anything like that.
Mhm. What is your, as far as the process, like gray wash being a good example, and you do, this is something I ask a lot of folks who work like you, the combining black and gray elements, mostly black and gray tattoos with color elements, I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of times is really tricky, like something like this, for example,
Well, so
this
this
is
is a little bit different too. I've recently gotten to doing more opaques. And so
okay.
this is actually black mixed with white. And I use the same drop setup, um, that I do when I dilute with water, but I'm diluting with white instead. And this was actually a cover up right here that you're showing.
Oh, okay. Nice. Where's the cover up?
It's under there.
Oh, well done. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
appreciate it.
So what made you make the transition to opaque grays instead of gray washes?
Really, I get inspired by, the industry and just seeing like different applications and techniques and stuff, and again, I'm already a black and gray artist, so my understanding of creating those values and light tones, it's already there, so I'm kind of just taking that same concept and, mixing it with the opaques, and it's been a lot of fun. The application is totally different, uh,
Hmm.
like not at all the same, but again, to achieve those values, the fundamentals are much the same. The
Yeah.
Those opaques, I mean, you're pretty much, it's very deliberate, and you have to be confident in your setup for sure.
Yeah. Are you mixing the two? So, like, for example, is this all opaque grays and blacks, or is this more, is this washes and this opaque, or do you ever play with using the two together?
I have done that where I did like a black, like a traditional style black and gray face, and then I had some flowers around it that I did in the opaques, and that was kind of cool. But whenever you do mix the two, the opaques just trump the regular black and gray, and it really makes
Right.
the black and gray look unfinished. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the things with my style of work too. It took me forever to figure out how to mix black and gray with color without making the black and gray look unfinished. And that's one thing that's kind of was difficult for me for a little while. But then I started. That's one thing I teach in my seminars too. Is how I go about that.
Yeah, that is a well. So here's a pretty good example of how like this face transitioning from these blues to the grayscale. And I mean, obviously, the most important thing is that is that the values make sense. So if you dropped it on a grayscale, the blue would make
100%.
sense with the gray. But like you're still what I've noticed, and I'm no master of this by any stretch, but I do look at the at folks like you who are doing this a lot, and I try to make sense in my mind of how it works. There comes a time where you just have to abruptly drop the color out. Like you have to. Is that true? Like so, for example, like if you were to try to if you grab some of those oranges and dropped them in the highlights in the nose, do you think that would be disruptive, or do you feel like it's important to like know where your color drops out and everything kind of
Yeah.
turns black and gray?
So like looking at the photo, like in the cheek where your cursor is at, like it looks like an abrupt stop, but I was actually mixing from my light blue tones and then gradually dipping because it doesn't make a smooth transition. So I was dipping from my light blue into like a 2 drop of opaque and creating a nice transitional blend. But I wanted to almost seem striped so that it has sort of an abrupt stop. I didn't want that to be like a very smooth gradient. It was almost
Hmm.
trying to be like it was striped.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that's one of the things is transitioning those colors, especially those pinks and blues into each other. It creates like over there on that left side where that
Hmm.
pink glow is. That's
Hmm.
a really interesting color combination that kind of messes
Definitely.
with your head. Just
Yeah.
creating those value or those color tone changes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's and like the like pinks to blues is one thing, warm and cool, but then pinks to oranges is a different kind of
Yeah,
problem,
because where
right?
your cursor at is that up there by the feet.
Hmm.
That like blue into like terracotta mixed with a purple. It makes
Uh-huh.
it really unattractive in your needle color, but you're like that's what happens in nature. There's these weird muted tones that are so necessary to create this type of imagery, and
Yeah.
it creates a tremendous amount of separation between the colors. It kind of makes like that weird browny bluish purple, and it's like that's a color you would never deliberately, like I'm
Right.
mixing that in the tattoo machine, like, and so you're not just pouring that out going, oh, that color's going to happen. It's almost like this weird acceptance of creating this type of art to create those types of transitions.
I think that's a really important point, and I think a really great reason for using a simple color palette, a kind of a limited kind of color palette, long enough to figure out what the off tones are. And if you find you're mixing the off tones a lot, then you could probably go buy them because there's a trillion colors out there. But like you're saying, like there's no way you would even know to buy this tone. Like you would never know that that belonged there if it wasn't this amalgamation of all these other things, all these other colors kind of coming together
Right.
in the
And that's one of
tube.
my favorite parts about tattooing is, I mean, I don't suggest if you're new at tattooing to go that way about it, but I just trust in the process, and I just know like as I'm doing it, I'm going to do what's necessary to achieve the proper tones that are there. And I really enjoy like mixing colors, and I'm like, oh shit, this color is super unique, and it's just like that it's so pleasing as an artist to be creating in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the way that you're using, so like even if that you've set yourself up for success, because even if that blend, which it looks in this photo like it worked seamlessly, but even if it didn't, it's secondary to this like strong contrasted kind of silhouette, the high tones in the, you know, in the center of the chest, all the, you know, all the other things that are happening. How do you balance like focal points when you have, you know, when you have what
Well,
can
I use
be.
body structure, I mean, the Fibonacci sequence, breaking down the human body into, sections, like the body takes up that shoulder cap muscle area. And then, we've got the lady face right there in the middle. And then I utilize the tricep muscle to accent her cheek, and then also those kind of black, tribal marks on her cheek, that fits really well onto the tricep. And then on the bicep, if you look over in that bright pink area on that front side, just the way that I created those black arches and that glow, it fits the muscle structure. Like it really adds to the shape of the bicep. And it's like you can create these amazing designs, but then when you put it on the human body, all of a sudden the design is clashing with the natural flow of the muscle structure. And then like down towards the bottom where the crystal is, that's a very prominent spot. And I wanted that to fit nicely on top of that muscle structure. Um, and to design a tattoo, whether he's wearing a t-shirt or a long sleeve, is going to be appealing. Sometimes people just design and all of a sudden they put their pants on or some shorts or a t-shirt, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? Like a weird part of the tattoo's hanging out. You can't tell what it is. I think that's
Yeah.
really important. I try to think about that as I'm designing the piece.
I think that's an important point too. I think about that. I remember years ago doing a guest spot and listening in to an artist do a consultation, and it was a big kind of thigh rib piece on a younger, really fit kind of woman. And the artist was like, "Can you just have someone to photograph you wearing like a bikini, a sundress, the things that you like want to show this tattoo off, like the type of clothing that you wear to show off tattoos." And I thought, well, what a weird question to ask. I never considered that. But then he was thinking about that very thing. It's like, like sometimes like muscly dudes will wear a t-shirt that drops off right at the top of the deltoid. Other people have t-shirts that drop off midway through the bicep. And that's just kind of who they are and what they wear. And then
Right.
you end up with like these funny like things that stick out that just a point of some distraction where you're like, what is that thing right there? Like in the
Yeah.
middle of that tattoo. But yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, good. I think it's a yeah, an interesting point. What do you think about so down here on this on the lower arm where I mean you're gonna end up getting kind of the most sun and it will be seen more than anything, and you don't have any kind of like deliberate, there's nothing black down there really, and there's no bold line work. What
Right.
do you
Well, so
think
this
about?
isn't so this piece isn't done. I'm actually doing a whole
Okay.
sleeve on him. So there's going to
Okay.
actually be some heavy blacks that encapsulate the dark. I think I was using like dirty scarlet and undead red around the what was I using? It was a solid ink color. I think it was called like
Okay.
uh El Dorado or something like that. And again, this guy's from Canada, and so he doesn't see the
Mhm.
sun a lot. So you have to design for where the person lives. Like if a client came to me from Puerto Rico, I'd be like, yeah, yellow is probably not the best color for an area that you're going to get blasted with the sun. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm a firm believer too. I mean, I've seen tattoos that are 20 plus years old that if you go in the right depth of skin and the application's proper, the tattoo will hold up just fine. And it's about having really bold, saturated areas. And like if you really look at that, I could have over detailed that crystal, but I went really, really simple. Everything I was able to just saturate really hard. There's not a bunch of separations and stuff like that. Um, and at the same time,
Yeah.
I didn't want it to try to overpower the face. Like when you look at this image, the top part and the bottom part, they're almost, just 2D, if you will. And then the face
Mhm.
is 3D. So that's creating a contrast in itself as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. That's a really great point. And that you framed a realistic thing that has a deliberate like light source that looks believable with two kind of flat graphic elements. And you're right, if you can try to visualize those crystals like fully rendered with a light source and catching every little fractal, like every turn of the crystal, it could easily turn into a distraction.
Right. And there's
Yeah.
very little white in there. You know, I try not to overpower with white. Like when you look at that tattoo, it's a lot more mid-tone and dark tones than it is into the like the lighter values. Like even in the face, you know, most of that's actually still pretty dark. You know, there's just some very strong white highlights to really help push and pull the image.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that. I can remember I don't know where we were, but the last time that we were tattooing at the same show, we did I came over and I did like a little rapid fire questions, and I remember coming and asking you whatever the question was and like paying attention. You were booth with James, and I remember noticing like, wow, the whole tattoo for the longest time looks way darker than I thought it would.
Right.
Yeah, super, super deep. And, you know, it may have been Hell City, like a dark room, anyways, or something like that. And so it just looked really rich and
Yeah.
deep and dark.
Well, and that comes with time of, you know, tattooing. I've been tattooing 21 years now, and it's like I went through a stage, I think everybody too was like no black, no outlines, like,
Hmm.
you know, and then we see how that stuff heals up. So it's like now, you know, just bold, readable, you know, tattooing is super important, you know, for longevity. And I like to create a tattoo that you can see from a distance, that you don't have to necessarily get all up on it to see the artistry behind it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, completely. Yeah,
And
completely.
this piece is still a work in progress right here, but I
I've,
was really
I've
happy with it, so I wanted to put that up.
Man, I love it. I've looked at this piece a handful of times, and when I was telling everyone that you were coming on, this is one of the pieces that I pulled up. I love the snake. Looks almost like an X-ray. A lot of the abstract kind of like negative shapes are so interesting. There's just so much. There's so many
Yeah.
cool things happening in this
Well,
piece.
I tried to channel my inner Dolly with like a modern twist tattoo style, you know, because you know he has paintings that he used, you know, snakes, and paintings that he's used tigers and stuff like that. And so I wanted to kind of get trippy with it without necessarily using his art, and kind of giving it a tattoo artist, you know, style to it.
Right. Yeah, definitely worked. That might be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about your kind of design process. I mean, are you like, and we can use this piece as an example because you have some pattern-based stuff, you have some realism, you know, you have some kind of abstract stuff, a little splash of color here and there. Like what, like when you're in, well, let's just use this piece as an example. Like who is this client? How did this thing come about? And what, like how, all the way up to in needles on skin, like what was the consultation through the design process? What did it look like?
You know, man, it's he's actually a really cool client. We were just kind of vibing back and forth, and you know, he wanted to do something Dolly inspired, you know, and I was like, oh, I'm a fan of Dolly, and we had like that moment together. You know, and he was talking about, he showed me a snake and he showed me a tiger, and I was like, we could, you know, incorporate both of those. We ended up doing two snakes, and it's just it's sometimes it's hard for me to put into words how I create what I create. You know, I feel like not on some hippie shit, that I kind of channel what needs to happen to create the tattoo that the client is wanting, you know. And I use a traditional, you know, mindset, you know, with like black mid-tone and skin, and so I kind of break that down. You may not see that in this tattoo, but if you look at the amount of, you know, portrait work compared to flat design style, and then just a little pop of color, you know, I try to think about that, you know, even having to where like the spine on the snake is just 100% skin, you know. And even in the lighter tones, the way I break down my black and gray is I make sure that even in the light gray scale, that there's it's broken down into like a rule of three as well. um
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered.
Well, so yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and I yeah, like the rule of three being like black skin color, like a Japanese kind of rule of
Yeah.
three, I guess is what you're talking about. And
And,
then
and the Japanese is, you know, not to take credit for, you know, doing black and gray and color, but I mean that they're the originators of that, you
mhm,
know.
for
And
sure.
so I've just there was a point when I was an apprentice, I was drawing bunch and bunch and bunch and a bunch of Japanese work, and it
Yeah.
just kind of carried over. I really enjoy the finesse of doing black and gray, but I also enjoy doing color. and incorporating line work, like, those little circles in there. I was going in with like a 9 round shader, and I made all those super clean lines in there. And like, that's so satisfying to me as an artist. I get very bored just duplicating a picture. It's like, oh, I just did a photo. No discredit to people that do that. It's amazing, but I just don't feel like I'm creating anything. So I like to incorporate this like hyper realism, black and gray stuff, and then kind of this neo trad hand drawn snake that's woven through all of it. That's kind of 3 dimensional, and all of a sudden down towards where Dahlia is now it's like a window that you're looking through the snake to it, and then it goes into like that flat, you know, pattern down there, and that's a
Right.
lot going on in just one snake.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So my assumption looking at the design, because I recognize the Dali portrait, and obviously that looks like it came from Tiger reference. Are you starting with like blocking out shapes, like you were talking about the shape of the body and using
Yeah,
that
so
kind
I
of
basically drew up the tiger, fighting. There's actually two snakes. I don't know in this video if you can see it. There's one on the other side where like the mouth of the tiger is. One snake is black and the other snake is white. Um, and I just started drawing kind of like a neo trad style, just drawing up my own snake. And then I had the idea. I was like, man, I could fit a Dolly portrait down there. So I went through different references and seeing what would fit there. Was made the portrait still really readable. And it's just like this organic process. Like the way my brain works, it kind of just sees these opportunities and like, how can I make this work, or what can I do to have fun creating this
yeah,
piece?
yeah. How often are you collaging photos to start blocking something out, and how often are you just drawing from imagination to start?
It depends on the client. Some people come in and it's mostly, like hand drawn stuff. It just depends. And I'm so lucky as a tattoo artist. My clients are just like, yeah, do whatever. I love your stuff. They'll give me like a few words, and, I'll just kind of start creating. Some of them are just, I don't know. I feel like they're all kind of
Yeah,
unique in their own way.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
And I
Talk
do what's,
about,
go ahead.
go ahead. What were you about to say?
I just keep repeating. I just like having fun tattooing, and that's the most important, I think, as an artist. Instead of trying to do like this wow factor thing, it's just like, what are you feeling? Like what's going to be fulfilling to create? And that's going to allow you to create the most highest quality work instead of forcing yourself to do something that you're not really vibing with, but it's what's cool or whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. This is interesting. It's a collaboration that we're showing now, and I don't know. I've never met Danny Elliott, but I've seen a little
Now,
bit of Andreas's design process. Compare, like he does a lot of collage, right? I mean, he's not
yeah.
drawing a whole lot. So when you're building stuff out like this, what do you, when you're working with obviously other super high level people, what can you think of something you took from this collab where you're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to start incorporating that.
I always learn from a collaboration tattoo, and I tend to try to pick people that I think it's very important to pick people that you're going to be able to work cohesively with. I feel like just with my style of tattooing, I'm able to really kind of work in any direction, whether it's color or even like a neo-traditional style. And I kind of just I try to fill the void of whatever is kind of missing in the collaboration, and just contribute my my creativity in there.
Yeah.
I really like letting other people, make sure that they're getting to do what they do at their highest level, and which creates a learning experience for me as well. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have necessarily done that this way, and then all of a sudden I'm working on an area that they started, and now I'm trying this new application, or I'm blending these three colors together that I've never used before, would never pour out, and all of a sudden, that's amplifying my skill set at that point, and I feel the same for them. I'll pour out a black and gray set, and all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, I love this. I've never tattooed like this. And so we're all working off this synergy of like really pumped to work with each other and evolve each other at the same time.
Yeah, 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 it's beautiful. Did you guys bring in a professional videographer for this, or did you set up cameras and do this on your own?
No, so one of my really good friends, he shoots a bunch of my stuff. I had him come to Austin with us to get the final photos, and shout out
Nice.
to him for staying up. The last session we tattooed from, I think, oh man, I think we started at like 10 or 11 a.m. and we tattooed till 6:30 a.m. the next morning, and then he was shooting
Oh,
the final video like as the sun's coming up.
oh, wow. Holy
Yeah,
crap. That's incredible.
yeah.
Wow.
And he,
Huh.
everybody was from out of town. One of, Danielle, he's from Denver, Colorado, so he bought a plane ticket. The client, I, I think, drove up from Houston, or he was from out of town as well, and then I drove up from Dallas. We're in Austin, so it's like to get three of us that are booked to be able to get there the same day and make this happen. It's just like it's grind time.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. And that's, I mean, that's another kind of interesting interesting point is like deciding that you want to make this project happen, getting it all together, finding the client. I guess I assume you've done this quite a few times now with different collaborative kind of partners. Talk about that and then three different tattooers. I mean, I've done like a collab with one other person, but now we're in a new era of tattooing. You've been tattooing 21 years, so like we didn't used to see tattoo teams, like tattoo pro teams that were like five folks doing a back piece in a day. Like what's your experience with working with multiple tattooers from a design and execution kind of standpoint?
And I've had such good times with my collaboration artists that I've worked with. I haven't had really any negative experiences or any issues. This piece was super fun just for the fact that literally three of us got to work on it this at the same time almost the entire time. And we would just kind of rotate around. And, like on this piece, which is awesome, is, we all kind of worked on everything, and which creates as a really cohesive piece instead of it looking like, oh, you did that part and you did that,
Yeah.
so.
That's what I mean, when I first was introduced to collaborations, when I first started seeing this, and this would have been in magazines and stuff, I knew for sure who did what. It was like two tattooers that I knew, and I
Mhm.
looked at the piece and I'm like, oh, Russ did that and Guy did that. I can tell who
Yeah.
did what. There was no like, it
Which
was
that can have a cool look too. I
sure,
mean, and
yeah,
obviously two talented artists, they're like, I mean, they can make it work, whether you're working with a traditional artist and then a portrait artist, and the traditional artist creates this badass frame and some
hmm
flowers, and then the portrait artist goes in and does this amazing portrait. Like that looks awesome too, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just two
But what
different
about
ways to go about it.
Yeah, but what about so like with those? I understand like the mechanics behind that, but so for example, with this, there are a lot of subtle like color combinations happening, a lot of like warm against cool, different lighting, like even just your ink setup. Like, are you working off of a single ink setup? If so, how in the hell are you like working? Are you
No,
working
we
over the
actually
top of each other or what?
had three different Mayo stands set up, and we poured all the same colors that we could achieve. There'd be a point like, hey, which one were you dipping in here? Whether it was like crimson,
Uh,
mulberry, or whatever the tones were, and we would, be like, hey, dip into that, and then hit that ink cap, and then we would do that, and I'd be like, oh shit, cool, yeah, that's the color, and then we'd be
uh,
blending out. So there was constant,
Communication.
communication between all of us and kind of coaching,
Gosh.
if you will.
Yeah.
You get to a spot, it's like, hey, what are you gonna do over here? Because again, you have reference, but also we're in here finessing this thing, doing stuff kind of like, taking out something there. Oh, hey, I'm going to actually change up, this and make this a little bit brighter or add a glow here that wasn't there and things like that. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, good idea. Cool. Yeah. Let's run with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And that's really interesting with that yeah, the kind of I mean forced communication for lack of a better term. Like you can't really zone out and do your own thing when there are two other people who have already had a couple of hours in the area. You're like, I don't even know what like where did you start with this? That's
yeah,
yeah, that's really interesting. This stuff has gotten to be like popular
yeah.
the kind of it's so what brought you have you done are you doing a lot of this
No. So this
no?
client is like a friend of some friends, and she reached out, and I just enjoyed the challenge of it. I was
Hmm.
like, because I mean, a lot of people would turn this away, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I take pride in my line work and my skill set and being able to do something like this. So, and at the same time, if I don't do it, she's going to go to somebody else. And I know the fact that I can do a good job. I want to give her that service of me being able to, do something like this for her. And it was actually a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and,
Is it freehanded or did you
yeah,
start
I
with
just
it?
drew it on with a marker.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
that's the only way. You probably take this off and lay it on the floor. It would be
Yeah.
not a straight line, So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it took longer to draw it on than it did to tattoo it.
Oh, yeah, I bet. And then, and then with the like the subtlety of like thickness and thinness of marker lines, like stencil getting fat and getting thin. You really have to
Yeah.
dial in and focus on your. Do you do a lot of and watching the little bit of tattooing that you're showing here, it's kind of like A to B, like pulling straight lines. Do you do a lot of scumbling to build up line weights, or do you
No,
just not at
it's
all?
get it in the right depth and pull it, and being
Yeah,
super consistent.
yeah, yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
like you can always see, I mean, you can create some clean lines like that, but you're not going to be able to get as clean of a line as if you just put it in the skin and set the right depth and get that tension and that right vibration that you feel, and just being super fluid, especially something that's that long. I think if you're doing something that was a little bit smaller, yeah, you could go in there and finesse some lines, but the cleanest lines are going to be some single pass, just fucking put it in the right depth, right speed, right tension, and go.
Are you for that style of line work? Are you using like pen style machines, or are you using
Yeah,
coils?
I used just my FK iron,
Okay.
and I used a like a 9 round shader. I really enjoy using round shaders for my line work. It causes way less trauma, and you
Yeah,
get a much more consistent line.
yeah. I've moved to that too, and I remember it's funny. You can go back 10, 15 years and watch needle configuration podcast that we did, where I was like, I don't even understand the point of a round shader. Why would you shade with anything round? This can't, coming from like an era where you lined with a 3, a 7, and then you did everything with a 7 mag. Like that's all that we ever used.
Oh
Like,
yeah, and if
why
you
would
wanted to
you
pick line,
shade with why would there be a purpose for a round shader? I know
yeah,
there's a video out there, and now that's all I use. It's funny.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, anyone, I know I'm dominating the questions here. Anyone, feel free to kind of jump in if you have any specific questions. I'm going to keep kind of flipping through, and if you don't, then I'll obviously keep asking. Um,
I mean, Jake, you're really good at it, so.
oh, come on now. Thanks. I just have a lot of questions. Um, the that's really interesting. Uh, the the subject matter itself, the kind of realism and the like the realism with faces, and then all of the neon kind of like uh crazy spacey stuff. Where did that combination come from? Was it an influence, or did it evolve from?
It's just evolved, man. Just through the time of just tattooing, and I get, I don't use the term, but get bored. But I feel like that's how you get burnt out. It's like try something different, and yeah, I mean, and again, we're all influenced by different artists and way that people, apply tattoos. But then it's about, still being your authentic self, and then taking, like, oh shit, that color combination was cool. Not taking the tattoo, but and creating your own art is so important and fulfilling, especially to,
Yeah,
to keep from getting burnt out.
yeah, yeah. I think I really have enjoyed. I haven't poured through your work quite like I am right now. And I guess I only see like the stuff that we first started with, but I love seeing stuff like this and that single line thing, because one of the things that we'll get a lot of questions on is like basically, how do I not do these tattoos? You know what I mean? Like, how do I get away from doing a tribal kind of like a simplified thing on a neck? How do I get to do the things that I want to do? And then I see you doing things, like obviously this is a cool piece, but it probably I don't know where the idea came from, but it probably wasn't what it became. And what you do so well is that you turn like what could be a pretty average tattoo into a really stellar tattoo.
Thank you.
And
Like this piece, this was actually on Danny Elliott, the guy that I did the
oh,
collaboration with on that big thigh piece,
mhm.
and he literally was like, "I want a snowflake." He was like, "Do your thing with it," you know.
Yeah,
Um, and then this is what I came up with. It's kind of got the duality of negative space and black work, kind of like a yin yang. It's got some crystals and some negative space. And I wanted to create something that's going to last. And wasn't like jumbled up with too much detail. And
mhm.
I wanted to utilize as much space as possible, and this is what I came up with for him.
Yeah, yeah, incredibly unique and thoughtful. You can tell that you didn't Google snowflake, or like, most people would start with a snowflake and be like, all right, that's what it's going to be. How am I going to set it on the hand where it has the most impact, and then you just continue to kind of evolve that.
Yeah.
Dan, you got a question?
So Balser in the comments says, how finished are your sketches that you present to your client? And another question added on to that is, do you present? And if you do, when do you kind of present a sketch to them?
That's a good question. So I do a draw day for all of my clients just because I a lot of what I do is hand drawn. I do use some portrait, reference. And a lot of the stuff I do is so out there that if I design my pieces sometimes before a client sees it, they're like, whoa, this has an extra eyeball and like a bunch of stuff, and to change one little thing, it really changes the entire design. Um, and one thing is just with the amount of time I've been tattooing, my portfolio speaks for itself. And so whenever I do generate a tattoo, sometimes my sketches are pretty not rough per se, but I can pull up my Instagram and be like, hey, you see how I have this like simple line right here? That's actually going to be glowing and have these types of elements to it. So I'm able to show the end product, by work that I've already done. And I'm very lucky for that because it would take me hours and hours to fully render some of these things and procreate, to produce this stuff. So I'm very lucky that my clients really trust in the process.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and I was that was another question I personally was gonna say is like, how do you sort of develop these? I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but like, how do you sort of develop some of these concepts when people go, do what you want? Because like that usually isn't enough of a prompt for most people, So like,
Well, it's not
you're
necessarily that. They'll be like, hey, I love your lady faces, or they'll have like some sort of a psychedelic experience that they've had, or, an animal that they like. And then, I kind of sit,
sure.
conversate with them and, I look at the body part. I look, I kind of just feed off of them. And it's such an organic process. That's one thing. It's so hard to put into words and explain exactly how I do it. But it's, yeah, I honestly, I designed to have fun, and not over fill areas with too much detail. I like to design very simple. I love saturating, large areas of black. I love using big chunks of skin tone. And that's what's going to create a tattoo that's going to last forever.
Right, and some stuff I've been noticing is that like you have certain approaches for particular types of elements. So like when a face comes in, it's usually realism, and whenever you have like a secondary element, it's a little bit more neo-trad
Yeah.
or Japanese whenever it's a claw or something like that. And
Yeah.
then
Like on this
you
piece
just
here.
right,
And
you just
again,
have yeah,
I like drawing. You know what I'm saying? I never want to be, and again, the portraits are fucking amazing. I do a lot of them, but it's just like, I like being an artist and creating stuff from sketching stuff out. Like it feels so good, and I feel like it has such a good contrast against realism. Um, and it, yeah,
It feels like you're kind of in the best of both worlds with a lot of stuff. Because I'm the same way in that I would be happy to shortcut probably some of my design process if I had the patience to search images and do collages, but I don't. I just tend to start blocking out shapes that fit the area of the body I'm drawing to and things like that. And so that evolves into what my tattoos turned into. The thing that I've noticed whenever, even if I were able to collage things that worked beautifully together, I don't enjoy looking at reference every 10 seconds. I don't like to
right.
look up from the tattoo. And I think that I noticed that in I can tell the difference in like even your lady faces, like your realism. I can tell that it's kind of invented realism a lot as opposed to a lot of like realism artists.
Right. Well, I have like formulas too that and I talk about this in my seminars, like things that I look for in specific areas to create like a cohesive style, even with my faces, certain shadows that I use, um,
Mhm.
and just things like that in contrast. I mean, I can take a photo that I just like the angle and I'll go in there and Procreate and I'll kind of sketch over it to idealize the image to fit to make a really strong tattoo because not all of them have the proper amount of contrast. It may be a beautiful face or she's hot or that angle's cool, but over time, the shadows and certain things about the face aren't going to last over time.
Yeah. I don't know who on the call who here saw our interview with Nico Hurtado, but he talked a good bit about that, the importance of keeping traditional tattoo kind of like a mindset whenever he's doing his realism, and like how much he silhouettes and how many of those silhouettes are completely invented, almost all of them. But yeah, same kind of idea.
And like this piece, that girl's back piece, she came in, it was like, oh, I want a Medusa. And I was just like, dude, that's like, it's been done so many times. And again, I'm designing to have fun. I'm like, I don't want to do a head full of snakes, and it also makes it to where the face is going to be small. And it's something that you're going to run into a person and be like, oh, we have the same tattoo. So my thing was, I made the female face, I made her a snake, so it's still same, but different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just noticed
really
that as you're talking about this. Yeah. She's got the kind of underbelly.
Scales on her head, snake teeth, a tongue.
Yeah.
And now she has something, my goal is, I've used this term, is like to give my clients the tattoo they never knew they always wanted. Me taking my expertise and my time in the industry to give them something unique and not just like, oh yeah, let's just do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it takes the client's trust in the artist and, being able to prove yourself with your previous work. And there's so many people that when I was first starting out, that I've done free tattoos on. It's like you got to have a menu before you can start charging people for your food items. You know what I'm saying? People always ask, how do you get to do all your cool stuff? It's like, tattoo the shit out of somebody, go to some nice restaurants or bars, and people will be like, holy shit, who did that? And then now that's exactly how it starts,
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. How much time are you spending painting these days as opposed to tattooing?
So this was actually an oil painting that I did. I don't paint enough, and my excuse is that I spend so much time tattooing that I get home, and I think letting your brain chill is so important. I'll use this analogy. You can only squeeze so much lemon juice out of a lemon. You know what I mean? And so when I get home, I don't do, I work out, I eat healthy, I meditate, I'll go to yoga, I'll hang out with friends. And I really try to shut my art brain off. I've got a painting sitting over here that's talking shit to me right now. That's like, you won't paint me. But I do enjoy it, but it's just, I feel I don't want to take my job in vain and just, and there's other people that are the opposite. They can tattoo all day, go home and paint, and they fucking love it. But for me, I don't paint a lot. I did have a lot of fun on that piece. And it makes me want to paint more watching this video. I'm like, I need to do more of that.
Right. It's impressive that you like don't paint much, but you've got a 4 foot by 5 foot. You're like, I don't really have a lot of time for painting. Let me just stretch a canvas that's the same size as me.
Yeah. And again, I tattooing is just another medium. Like whenever I do art, it's like, it's your comprehension of what needs to happen, of values, So for me, it wasn't, and honestly, that was my first oil painting. I had done like
really?
a small one before. And just, I don't know, my brain just understands it for some reason,
Yeah.
I even mixed out my grays very similar to I would do my gray wash, I very much approached this the way that I would tattoo. And when I did this painting, as I told myself, I was like, I want to paint loose. I want it to have brush strokes. And all of a sudden I'm painting like I'm tattooing, and it's like super crisp, and being meticulous. But I guess that's just kind of how I do stuff.
Right. Yeah. And
Nicole
most
has a question.
Oh, sorry, Nicole, go ahead. You have to unmute.
There we go. That's better, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess like what I'm curious about is how far along in your career did you really start to figure out how to combine all these various stylistic elements to create your voice, and what did that journey look like for you?
Well, so in my seminar, I talk about it. This is something I learned just in a podcast and heard this, and I was like, damn, that's kind of how I subconsciously used this method to create my transition into different styles. And so it's called the 80-20 rule. So if you're wanting to branch out into a different genre of tattooing, but say you're really good at traditional, right? And you're like, man, I can slay some traditional, but I want to get more into portrait work. So you would talk with your client, you'd be like, hey, I'm kind of wanting to try something a little bit different. still going to be traditional, but I think up in this corner, we're maybe going to do like a realistic rose or something, which is a great start for doing portrait work. So whenever you create this tattoo, 80% of this tattoo is going to be what you can do 100% and make look fucking amazing, right? So, and then it gives you this little area to try something new. And whether this portrait of this rose comes out 100% looking just like that rose or whatever, it's still going to look great. But it gave you this little area to try something new. And so you can kind of, and then as you do that, you can kind of keep applying it. And then all of a sudden, the next one, you're like, well, I killed that rose. That came out really nice. Well, now we're going to do this hand mixed with, you know, some traditional flowers. Now maybe the subject matter is more portrait, but then it still has some traditional in there. And you can all of a sudden start to rotate your style into a different direction instead of sitting down a client or somebody and you're just crossing your fingers and you're about to do this whole big portrait, you know, which can create and can mess with your mindset too about going back in and trying something like that. So that's a really important way. And to do what you're good at, because people are like, how do you find your style? My style was things that I was good at. And that creates good interactions with your clients. That's good work that's out there that people are going to see and they're going to come to you, you know? And so you just start adding these little nuances in there that might be a little bit different, but the overall tattoo is still awesome. And then you just keep adding that little bit of newness to it.
That's a great interpretation or way to apply the 80-20 rule. That's a famous rule in all types of ways, you know, like that's a great way to think about it. I love that. Like 80% of the tattoo is something you know you can nail. And even if you don't nail the 20%, the tattoo is still a success. And it probably is a success. I mean, you know, they say like if you're kind of if you're shooting for whatever a 10x return, even if you land 3x, it's like pretty good, you know. So even if the rose, to your point, isn't like the rose you wanted, I mean, it's probably still pretty good, you know. Like
that's to try it, you know. And you didn't create a tattoo that you feel bad about, you know, or that you're not going to be happy with.
Yeah. So something I was just looking at this one as you're talking and thinking about the importance of kind of repetition of shapes in your work, like abstract shapes and realistic shapes, like believable shapes. So you've got the those shapes. You've got like this kind of vertical that's dark that breaks the plane of the hand, and this vertical that's a negative shape that lands into the hand. But you do them like this one without this one is an eyesore, right?
Right.
That doesn't work without this, and you do that a lot with all kinds of shapes. Is that subconscious or conscious or?
Man, it's subconscious, bro. And like what's weird is when I do it, sometimes I'm making these decisions. Like I'll lay out these key shapes, just laying out the composition, and I'll be tattooing and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be solid black or negative space. And all of a sudden, you know, I try to be in the moment and working on this specific area. And I'm like, okay, well, this is dark. And I'm mindful of like how contrast needs to play off of each other. And so kind of I'm watching it kind of form as I'm working, which again it's fucking fun. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not encouraging someone to do that if you're haven't been tattooing a while, because you could have be in a scenario where you're kind of like, oh fuck, you know? But like that one you were showing is like, I had all that sketched on there and I really didn't know what was going to be positive or negative. And then sometimes, you know, I'm adjusting the contrast or darkness of something as I'm tattooing it. And I may go darker in an area than in the reference that it's not. And so, you know, I just, it's a very like ebb and flow of like what's going to happen, you know. It's really fun.
Yeah. How do you think about that? Because you are making a lot of decisions in the skin, obviously. Like, what do you, and over 20 years, you know, you learn when the skin's had enough and when it hasn't. But what do you think about when are you trying to render and finish as you go, or do you know, I'm not sure how dark this actually is, I'm gonna leave some room to come back through. Like I'm gonna leave the skin in a place that I can come back through and
a lot of my stuff, you know, depending on how large it is, like I kind of work like a printer. And so I make those decisions pretty confidently and at the time, because again, I try not to overwork the skin. And every time I touch the skin, it's very, very deliberate and with the proper tone. And that's what kind of gives it that real richness to it. And try not to irritate the skin too much. And that's again where, you know, the consistency in your wash setups and all that stuff plays such a big part, because, you know, I can take a dark wash And if I tattooed that in the skin, and pretty much anybody around me, if they saw it, they'd be like, that's black. And I'm like, I know in about 30 minutes, once that redness chills out and it's next to my black, that it's not black. And then all of a sudden it creates these really deep tones, which I feel like are the most important ones that give stuff a lot of depth that I'm even guilty of doing back in the day. Is my wash setup was so light, there was this big gap of value that would be missing between my blacks and my lighter tones. And so I've really enjoyed that darker depth of field and separation.
Yeah. I think that's a common early tattoo mistake is to work in midtones for way too long and end up with no real deliberate decisions, and you can't tell where, like, you don't even know what you're supposed to look at in the heel tattoo. Everything's
I want to
underdone.
work on this sleeve so bad. He needs to come
It's
back.
such a cool, yeah, man. I was just like such a cool piece. I was thinking, looking at the first of all, I was first looking at the muted tones in the foreground of the portrait and the color background, and then I was also looking at this like kind of brick reddish line work, which is it just like, is it a gray? Is it
No,
gray
so
lines with red over, or what
that's
is it?
just like a light wash line, and that all of that was in one session pretty much. I did that hand and then wash lined all of that stuff in there. And
This chain is a gray wash line or a color wash line?
it's a wash line,
No
straight wood
shit.
wash.
It looks like brick red.
Yeah,
Huh.
and I mean that could be the fact that when I was working on the hand up there, that there are some deep red undertones that I was mixing with my opaques
Yeah.
as you wipe and stuff. But I've seen him since then, and it's just like a very light wash line. And I like doing a wash line because it's easy to cover up even with a mid-tone. So you end up with literally zero line work in something if you're trying to make it look realistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this is a yeah, talk for a second if you can about this piece. It's a bold move, I think, to have the kind of these are just all opaque grays, I guess, in the foreground
Yeah.
and then the color background. Normally people think about color saturation like jumping forward, but obviously the way that you've rendered it, the foreground face reads as if it's in front, like the strong contrast and
Right.
silhouetted shapes and all that kind of stuff.
Well, again, it's like I almost throw out the fact that other face is even color, and you have to think about it in terms of value and contrast instead of just like, oh, bright colors. You know what I'm saying? Like if you take this tattoo and turn it black and gray, it's gonna read really hard. And so that's also whenever you're using references, portrait references, it's important to understand what's making like that male face had a dark background behind it. So I knew that the face behind it needs to have a darker value to push that face out. You know what I'm saying? So that it still is acting like a background, even though it's still foreground. Because in reality, he's actually inside of her chin, like, which is kind of trippy. So he's not necessarily on top. It's like a very weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that it is. It took me a
So
second. It wasn't until I zoomed out that I realized that like that's
yeah,
her jawline, and
yeah,
he is almost like framed by her face.
yep,
Yeah, yeah, very surreal. Yeah, that's and bold. Like it's a bold decision to make, because you pulled like the color in here. You also have the kind of post of this lantern or whatever whipping in that area. A lot of
mhm,
like you made a lot of decisions that I would have been scared like, oh, this could go south pretty fast. Like
yeah,
like this, like what if this became this tangent and grabbed a lot of attention? But for me, it didn't. I was just paying attention. You did a good job of pushing my focus away from like that being a thing. Yeah.
thank
Yeah. Yeah. Really cool, man. Your video guy, is he doing a lot of your like final kind of production work? Because you've got a lot of storytelling and a lot of eye candy outside of the tattoo all the way through
Yeah,
these.
he's a friend of mine. We've known each other for quite some time. And I tattoo him, so we kind of work with each other and kind of making each other's lives badass.
Yeah.
So the guy that has the head tattoo is actually my videographer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That thing, the healed photo of that, we were talking about something else whenever that went by, but that settled in so nicely, that
Thank you.
portrait settled in so nicely. Yeah. Um, yeah, super cool. I don't want to keep you all night. We're an hour in. Usually these things go hour and a half. Does anyone want to Anyone have questions?
I thought I saw a couple questions pop up.
Oh yeah, Dan,
One.
Dan, will you read whatever's popping in?
Yeah. Yeah, Balser has a question again.
Okay.
He said, I find, unless you want to unmute and say it,
You
give him a second. He's
okay.
trying.
Okay.
And it's not working? No? That's okay. I'll just say it, it's fine. He says, I find when I do color, I'm not sure how it's going to look until somewhere around the last 10%. So he's sweating it for a while. Does that sound normal to you, or is that like, you know?
I'm trying to understand what he means at the last 10%.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if you can. What's the
Your
issue
way.
with unmuting? Just can't.
I don't know.
Try tapping on the screen, like double tap the
Can you hear
screen.
me now?
There we go.
Yep,
He's good.
yep,
Yeah.
you're
Oh,
good.
he was there a second ago. Now he's gone. No, he's muted
Tap-
again. Sorry, we'll just edit this stuff out. Sorry, guys.
Oh, we don't have to edit it. It's fine. People can sit through it. If they didn't show up live, they get to sit through
Okay,
the
I think.
You
Am
got
I
it.
on?
Yes,
Yeah,
you're on.
you got it. You got it, man. Good job.
I'm trying to ask these questions so quickly, so I'm still on topic. Your work is so amazing. I find that sometimes I have an idea of what to do where I'm doing it, but it's a combination of these elements that I'm not too sure what these colors are actually gonna do until I'm near the end of my tattoo of the
Like,
project.
as the color, like as the redness and irritation chills out, is what you're getting at?
Well, it's like I know I'm gonna put some red or blue here and there, but the effect anyway. I find it so exciting at the end where I see the work I've been doing. When you were saying
Right.
that you kind of freehand, I also do that in my own way, and it's I don't really know exactly. I did a dragon face, two dragons, a fire one and an ice one, a couple of weeks ago, pretty big on the chest, and I figured just fire in the mouth, dark around the outside of the mouth, and let's go from there, kind of thing. And
Could we look at the piece? Do you have it? Do you have it on Instagram where we could take a look and know what you're talking about?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How long you been tattooing, if you don't mind me asking?
For 10 years now.
10 years? Okay, cool. So is color like a new medium for you? Did you mostly do black and gray?
Hold on one second. Before you answer that, Balser, what's your Instagram? Jake's just gonna pull it up.
Yeah, let me just pull it up so while you're answering Zach's questions, we can look and maybe get a feel.
Awesome. Wow. Balser Tattoo. BALCR Tattoo. So
C, not S.
Oh, C. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. You can answer. I'll find it now.
and it's the second one. I really love doing color. Yeah, that's there you go.
This is
It's a
okay.
cover up.
Okay, cool.
And I have like a reference picture of a dragon from Pinterest where it just shows. I just want to follow some basic colors and stuff, and then I just go ahead and
And so you're confused on what it's going, like what the final result is going to be. Like you don't feel confident in the color for 70-80% of the process, and you're kind of curious about what it's going to be.
One thing I'll say too is trusting in the pigments. Like whenever you're getting out your colors, right? Is making sure that you break it down the rule of three. You're going to have, obviously, using black is super important. So you can put that out. And then you need to have like a mid-tone red and a light red. And you could even have something that you can soften that like lipstick red or whatever red with, whether it's a tangerine or like a Georgia peach or something like that, to just pull it to its brightest tone. And then just really saturate it and trust the fact that that you shaded this specific area with the rule of three. It's like, okay, it's this much black, this much mid-tone, and this much of the lightest tone. And just trust in that, and that's really the biggest thing. Is you can get caught in your head, and sometimes you put a light tone in there and you're like, oh, it looks darker than it should be, and then you're like going back in there, and then you start chasing it in circles, when maybe the first time that you made that pass, it actually was good, and you need to just leave it, You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And also just consistency, you know, like uh, maybe try whenever you use reds or blues, and this will kind of help you create a style as well. Pour out the same fucking reds. This, and then each tattoo, you're like, oh, and you start to learn this formula with these same three. Instead of this tattoo, you used these three reds, and then this tattoo, you used these three reds, and then this tattoo, you had like purple under your red. It's like if you look at some of my work, I'll use the tones, and they're the same color palettes. I mean, recently I've been branching, getting a little more wild with it, but you create this trust in your work because you've done it so many times, you know? And like, say, you know, there's a set of blues, use the same blues and really, really learn how those specific colors. And then once you've got those down, then you can branch out to, you know, maybe laying a purple undertone under your red, you know, or, you know, and start tweaking it from there. But it's kind of creating that trust in your process, you know?
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
think
I was,
I,
was a
I
little
I think
distracted.
also, you know, when you think about it from a standpoint of principles, you know, you're doing a good job of like drawing shapes that fit the body, that fit the body well. And then it comes to values, to like dark and light. And dark and light is so much more important than color. So if you know, for example, like what on these, like Zach was talking about, if you pulled that I was talking about the black and gray face in front of the color face. He's like, if you dropped it to grayscale, it would work. That is the most important probably statement that he made in that part of the discussion, is that like, so for example, in the reds here, that yellow, because it's silhouetted by all the darks of the teeth, like if that's your strongest shape, which that's kind of what I want to look at the most. I want to look at like the glow inside the mouth framed by the silhouetted teeth outside of the mouth. Everything outside of that like should be probably darker than that yellow inside the mouth. But see, I see these little like juts of this same color. I see them all on the underside of the belly. I see them out here. And it's because you're trying to use that color everywhere. But from a value standpoint, you probably want that lightest tone to be inside the mouth. Because that, I mean, at least, or you need to make that decision. But to me, in this piece, that brightest tone should be inside the mouth. And nothing out here, none of this stuff should be as light as this.
Yeah. And at the same time, you did a good job covering that up. I mean, the tattoo's gone, you know, you do have dark tones, mid tones, and a lighter tone. But I think, like I was saying, is having that repetition of using the same colors, unless obviously you're doing a flag or something and it's a specific red. But as an artist, try to use a consistent color palette, which will help you create a style, and you'll learn, like you'll know as soon as you put this color in and you dip into this one, exactly what it's going to do, and it's not going to be this mystery as
Yeah.
you're going.
That is a very good point.
Good point.
That's
Thank you, sir.
just and Kurt has a question, but before we move on to Kurt's question, that's something I've heard somebody like Andy Chambers say a lot. You know, just he uses dried blood like more than any other color, and then he'll say using like a peach, or like, you know, he does his reds in an extremely specific way, or his blue transitions in an extremely specific way. He'll use like these three colors for you know, each hue, and it's similar to what they've already been saying. Like there's so many artists that do that kind of thing.
It's like, it goes back to the 80-20 thing that Zach was just talking about, where you like if when you're testing a variable, only test that variable, like get everything else pinned down, and when you're ready to take a leap there. Don't take a leap in 4 directions at once. Take a leap in one
100%.
spot. Yeah, that's these, like, sorry, Kurt, I'm gonna let you talk, but these your loose sketches here for these things are beautiful. I love this stuff, is so nice.
Yeah, more of that. Keep that going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead,
Kurt, what you
Kurt.
got?
He's gonna roll on over.
Yeah, I do. Hey, I don't have a question or anything like that. I just wanted to say thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing more from you. I'm gonna take your seminar in middle of the map, and again, just wanted to say thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate you listening in. I'm looking forward to meeting you.
You should definitely meet Kurt. He's one of our all-stars of the Inside Fireside Club. He's an incredible tattooer, and he's a large-scale like competitive tattooer. Like he travels to win best of show, and he wins
Hell
them all
yeah.
the time. And he's awesome. He's a great tattooer.
He does
And
30 to 60 hour pieces.
yeah, and a really awesome dude too. So you should
Awesome.
definitely catch up in middle of the map.
Forward
I
to
have
it.
not been to that show. You know, they their first one, they reached out and invited me, and I had something else, and then now everyone I know goes to middle of the map. I've never even met the people who put it on.
This is my first time there. I'm
Is
looking.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a great show. People seem to want to come back to it, and I hate that I missed it. I guess I kind of missed out on the. I mean, I'm sure I could still go, but I kind of missed out on the start of it.
I do want to say, if anybody else has any questions, it doesn't have to be relevant to something that was said recently. If there was something earlier in the conversation that you have a question about, or if you want us to go back to a topic, we can totally do that and like elaborate on something. So
If not, I want to talk about barefoot. I don't know if you know, I don't know if you keep up with me at all, but I'm a big wake water person. I've wakeboarded
Oh,
and
hell yeah.
skied my whole life. I've never done any barefoot skiing. I'm an old man now, so I do wake surfing. But how's that barefoot stuff?
Oh man, barefooting's fucking rush, dude. You can
Is it?
definitely take a slap. You know, I'm going.
Yeah.
Fuck, I think I'm going like 41
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, fast enough to skim across the water on your bare feet. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
how
Yeah,
do you
so
feel like
cool.
that helps your tattooing? Just kidding.
Honestly, you know what's wild? I think extreme sports and getting your brain to do other things to help wire different neurotransmitters and stuff like that. I noticed the healthier I got, the more that I work out. And I can literally take a break from making art and go snowboarding, take care of myself, work out, get my health on. Dude, I'll come back, fucking, my brain's just firing and I'm pulling
Right.
creativity from so many different areas. Again, I always use the analogy like you can only squeeze so much lemon juice out of a lemon, and you do need to grind and draw, but at the same time, you need to do other things for your brain, and those are going to help you dramatically. Like especially with artist block, like that's your body saying, "Go fucking do something else." Like you don't need to sit there and get frustrated, like, "Oh, I can't do it." Like, fucking take a week break if you can do it. Go try a new sport. Go fucking play tennis. Go rock climb. Go do something else to get your brain and use to do something else, and you'll come back into your art with a whole different perspective, and I can't encourage that enough.
Try and get
Yeah.
into calisthenics and then
Well
cry
said.
a lot, and then put your pain into your art.
Yeah, that too.
Well, yeah, well said. You should do you should co-host a Fireside Yacht Club with me. Have you seen Fireside Yacht Club yet?
I've heard of
We do a thing at my boat. I've got a motor yacht in Heber Springs, Arkansas, Greers Ferry Lake, like around the Ozarks. Beautiful,
Grizz
beautiful.
Ferry is beautiful, dude.
Yeah. So I'm there every weekend, and we just did our first yacht club. Nick Baxter was our co-host. We're doing one in June that Andy Chambers is going to co-host with me. But you should come do one since you're a water sports guy. We have a bunch of cliffs if you're into cliff diving, and it's only for 5 tattooers. So 5 tattooers, me and you and spouses or whatever. But it's cool. We spend the days on the boat. We've got in that area we have waterfalls and stuff, so we'll go draw and paint at the waterfall, hike a little bit.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, you should I'll reach out to you about it after this. We should plan one, and you should come and be my co-host for it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Anyone else? I know we're an hour and 15 minutes in. But I don't want to shut anyone down if you have questions. No? All right.
I just feel super inspired.
You want to what? Say it again.
I just feel super inspired, so thank you.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm glad that you got something from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm with you. I love I'm always excited anytime any of your work pops up. I love to see how it's evolved. I thought it was incredible 6 or 8 years ago, and then now I see what the next level of it is, and I'm excited to see what it is after that. So I'm just happy that you took a little time to spend with us.
Thank you. And I appreciate the tattoo industry. There's so many talented artists out there inspiring me as well. I love seeing all this crazy, cool new shit and the quality of work that's happening. So everybody just needs to keep killing it. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, if anyone showed up late, this was all recorded. We'll we'll post it once Dan gets it done, probably the next couple of days. And man, Zach, this is awesome. I hope we cross paths soon. I don't know what. I'm sure we'll see each other at a show soon. But either way, I am going to reach out to you about a Fireside Yacht Club. You should come do one with me. They're a lot of fun.
Get it, dude.
All right.
Most definitely.
Cool. All right, everybody. Good to see you all. Good night.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for spending a little time with us. I hope you got something out of that. Like I said, if you would like to be a part of these discussions going forward, we do these at least once every single month, along with Mindset Mondays and drawing challenges and lots of other events in the club. I'd love to have you try it out and see if it might be something that helps you grow your tattoo skill set. What else? I think that's it. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.